Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
America's export of soybeans helps the U.S. maintain a positive agricultural trade balance. Nebraska contributes half of its soybeans for export. The protein and oil content in soybeans enhance the growing demand for higher protein diets. The Nebraska Soybean Board promotes research to develop new soybean varieties with higher protein and oil content for major agricultural markets. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Market Journal, television for making agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension, where you can know how, know now. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Roy Smith analyzes long-term seasonal price charts for corn and soybeans. Brian Fuchs explains how recent rains affected drought conditions in Nebraska. Loren Giesler describes how cool, wet soil conditions could be conducive to soybean seedling diseases. Terry Hejny tells how you can apply for the Nebraska LEAD Program. Curtis Harms shows us how a feedlot in Argentina finishes its cattle, and Al Dutcher looks at precipitation probabilities for the summer months. It was an eventful beginning to the week for most of Nebraska. The weather spectrum ranged from snow in the west to tornadoes and heavy rainfall towards the east. The Nebraska Emergency Management Agency said the May 11th storms caused more than $20 million in damage. Near Ithaca, Nebraska, located in the southeastern county of Saunders, storms dumped more than 5 inches of rain, leaving standing water in fields and on roads. Governor Dave Heineman issued a state disaster declaration Monday, which his office says will allow state personnel and resources maximum flexibility when helping in affected areas. Roy Smith is our marketing analyst this week. The USDA's May crop report is projecting record corn and soybean crops for the 2014 harvest. The agency is estimating corn harvest at more than 13.9 billion bushels and soybean production over 3.6 billion bushels. It should be noted the nation's farmers had only planted 59% of their corn and 20% of their soybeans as of Sunday. We talked with Roy Wednesday afternoon and started by asking for an update on progress in his area of Cass County, Nebraska.
Planting has gone pretty well. We haven't had a lot of rain breaks, so to speak, and so I'm pretty sure that almost all of the corn has been planted, and I'm going to guess and say probably about half the soybeans. And they went in pretty good conditions, a little bit drier than we'd like, but got rain over the weekend. I had 2.5 inches here, rural Plattsmouth, and other neighbors and other locales all the way up to 4 inches. So it did us some good. It kind of caught up a little bit for a few days anyway.
The USDA Friday released their May crop report. How did the market react to those numbers?
It was pretty interesting. The crop report, the analysts, the economists were saying that the report was mildly bullish. They reduced the carryover on corn, and of course the soybean carryover has already been tight, but instead of going up, the market went down. The traders apparently decided that it wasn't as bullish as what the economists were letting on, and so we've seen a little bit of a pullback in the markets this week.
Why do you think that was?
Well, actually, I think that we've had quite a run in corn and soybeans both. A big surprise in corn, so to speak, because in December we were all talking about how low can it go, and since then it's gone up quite a bit. So I'd say two things. Number one is that the market is maybe a little overbought, and we had too many traders on the bullish side of it. And the other thing is that it's just seasonally time for the market to take a little bit of a break. And I kind of say this tongue in cheek, but I think the traders are watching my seasonal price trend charts, and and so we saw a little bit of a pullback this last week.
Now, going forward, as you look at the long-term seasonal price charts for corn, what do you see?
Well, corn and soybeans both, it depends on whether you're looking at new crop or old crop. You know, in terms of the old crop, especially with soybeans, we're still tight in terms of their supplies. For new crop, the market is looking ahead and saying, well, there's going to be a big crop this fall, so the price has got to go down, or stay down, maybe I should say, because we've got about a $2 discount for new crop soybeans as opposed to old crop. And more or less the same thing with corn, although the futures on new crop corn have held pretty much right in line with the old crop. So, you know, I think the market's anticipating a little bit that we're not going to have quite as many acres planted as what the government says. The government's already predicted a record yields, and, you know, take that for what it's worth.
Record crops for both corn and beans. Congratulations to the farmer, I suppose.
Right. Well, yeah. How do you do that with a limited number of acres of ground? But you know, well, the way you do it is to have really good weather, and right now is the middle of May, and you know, who wants to? I'll leave Al Dutcher to decide what the prospects are for good weather this summer.
I'm curious, long-term in beans, if you think, you know, the $2 discount that's there now, if you think that is realistic, or if you think long-term, once we get into November, December, and then the beginning of 2015, if we'll shave even a few more dollars off of that market.
Well, it's possible that you know, you look at the structure of the market right now, and as you said, new crop beans are a couple dollars below old crop beans. This past week, or 2 weeks, I guess, the 8th of May is the day on my seasonal price trend charts to be selling new crop beans, and I sold some new crop bean futures, actually more for speculating than because I'm not farming all that much anymore. But so even regardless of what you think the market is going to do with new crop soybeans futures over $12, I think it's a good sale, even if you think they're going to go up, because most people can make money on $12 beans.
What do basis numbers look like in this area of Cass County?
Well, the basis is actually held together pretty well. In fact, the basis has gone up in the last month. One of the things that I do when I'm preparing for these programs is to compare this month with last month, and the basis this month actually, even though the futures have gone up, the basis is improved, and that's a good sign, at least for the old crop supplies that people have got on their farms. But the other thing I guess I'd say is that I have the drop dead date of July 1st, and that seems like it's a long ways off now, but it's only 6 weeks, and you don't want to own any of those beans when the horse dies.
Next week, John Moret from J.E. Moret Grain Company will give us his thoughts on corn and soybean markets. As we mentioned at the top of the show, parts of Nebraska saw meaningful rain Sunday into Monday. That precipitation helped make a big change for long-held drought areas. UNL climatologist Brian Fuchs joined us Thursday to show where the state currently stands as of this week's U.S. Drought Monitor. Describe for me the rains that we saw, the major rains here in Nebraska over the weekend.
Well, what we saw was realistically one of the first big thunderstorm setups that we had this year. We had some warm air pushing in from the south, and all of a sudden the cold air from the north clashed. And right over central Nebraska into eastern Nebraska, we had some really good complexes of thunderstorms, very intense thunderstorms set up. And not only did they bring with it rain, but pretty substantial rain for some areas, upwards of over 7 inches of rain in that event. And then out in western Nebraska, we also picked up some good rain. Some areas had over 1 inch of rain and even some wet snow mixed in with that. And that really helped with the conditions out in western Nebraska as well.
The U.S. Drought Monitor released by you guys this morning shows a big change for Nebraska. 20% of the state no longer in drought, the most since June of 2012. That's a huge change for Nebraska.
Yeah, we did see a pretty good improvement over last week's Drought Monitor with this week's release, and almost a 17% reduction in the total amount of drought from last week to this week, which is substantial in our state. And what we're seeing is some of these areas that had been dry for the most part this year really picked up their first significant rainfall, which was good to see.
Are there areas that are also close to either lessening their categorization or completely exiting drought status?
Yeah, I think eastern Nebraska definitely is in a situation where we're not seeing as much drought, and we're right on the cusp of, another good event like this. We're going to probably see some more improvement. And the far western panhandle's in pretty good shape. There's some drought-free areas out there, and some that are just a little dry that, a couple good rain events will be out of really concern out there. But there are some areas that still have missed out, and we're still working on hopefully seeing some improvement in those areas.
One of those is southwest Nebraska. How dry is it there?
In southwest Nebraska, it seems like all the rain events and snow events that we've seen over the last year or so have either been to the north or to the east of those locations. It's very similar to what we're seeing in western Kansas down into the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles, that over the last year to 2 years, this area has just continually missed out on precipitation and very little chance of any recovery.
And California the same way, very dry as well.
Yeah, California is a pretty bad situation. Their third dry year in a row. The snowpack up in the mountains this winter was really bad. And as we go into the dry time of year out there, we're already seeing fires taking off, and there are going to be some water issues that are going to continue to develop out in California.
For Nebraska, if you were in one of these areas that got a lot of rain over the weekend, you feel pretty good, you're no longer in drought, but you say it's important to remember this was not really a silver bullet for the state.
Yeah, one rain event is good, but it's not going to cure all the problems. For a lot of the state, we're still below normal for the calendar year, meaning since January 1st to present, and only those few areas south of the Platte River along the I-80 corridor that picked up the greatest rains over the weekend, they're the only areas that are actually showing a surplus for the calendar year. So we need to continue to see regular rainfall events. The cooler temperatures are helping, but for a lot of Nebraska, several more rain events are going to be very beneficial.
Later in the show, Al Dutcher will give a long-range forecast detailing precipitation chances for Nebraska from spring into summer. Nebraska's farmers had planted 36% of their soybeans as of the latest USDA state report. But those recent rains have helped create cool, wet soil conditions for many fields, especially in eastern Nebraska. UNL Extension plant pathologist Loren Giesler told us Tuesday those environments could lead to seedling problems.
Right now we've got some conditions that are really conducive for soybean stand problems for any of the beans that are out there. Luckily we don't have a high percentage of our acres planted, but every year we'll see stand problems with Pythiums and Phytophthora and Rhizoc and Fusarium. With the cool, wet weather we're having in this last week in the forecast, I really expect to see more Pythium problems this year, similar to what we saw last year early in the season.
Yeah, what to look for in those fields, Loren?
Well, the biggest thing is if any of our soybean farmers know that they have had a stand problem, they probably are using seed treatments already. But if they haven't, and they're having these problems, and they haven't used treatments or whatnot, you want to make sure you're identifying those correctly. And really any type of skips, any population reduction. At the early stages, when you're looking at those plants, those cotyledons a lot of times will yellow and fall off of the plant, Jeff. That's a key symptom. It tells me there's something wrong with that root system at the early stage. So if you see any of that or wilting and dying young plants, that's where you're going to want to take a sample and make sure you're identifying that correctly so you can do the right thing in the future.
You said we might see some Pythium this year just like last year, but what about Phytophthora?
Phytophthora really needs soil temperatures above 60 degrees. So when we're looking at soils right now, we've got some in the 60s, but a lot of parts in the state we're still less than that. So when we're above 60 degrees and we're wet, we see more Phytophthora. When we're below 60, we see more Pythium. So that's why I'm saying with the cool front we're in right now and the rains that are delivering some cool water, we're going to see more Pythium probably. So that's going to be the key that we're going to be looking at.
And Rhizoctonia?
Rhizoctonia we usually see when we warm up some. We get some stress on the field in a well-drained field, sand or something where we've got well-drained conditions and warm conditions. So I don't expect to see a lot of Rhizoc right now. Maybe a couple weeks now, hopefully we'll warm up and then we might see some of that.
If you're needing to replant, would that be a situation where you would use a seed treatment again?
Well, at this point right now, Jeff, if we have a grower that's going to replant, as cool as the soil temperatures are, if they've had any problem, I would sure use a seed treatment fungicide in that field. As we warm up, sometimes we're at 65, 70 degree soil temperatures and then we're looking at replant. not quite as critical in that situation, especially if we don't have a big rain forecasted. But again, just like so many of our other diseases, these things are all going to be active based on when conditions are conducive and cooler temperatures that slow seedlings and their emergence and make them more susceptible, and wet conditions really make it favorable.
Are these things that you want to keep in mind either next year or in 2 years when you plant soybeans in this field again?
Absolutely. You always want to keep a record book. That's your best management program. So if you get that identified correctly, or if you know what it is and you see that, keeping a note on that so you're using the right treatments and working on that field correctly in the future for management.
You can find information on submitting field samples to UNL's Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic through a link on the Market Journal homepage. You can also find a link there to a CropWatch article on early season flooding impacts on soybean survival. Empty plastic pesticide containers on your farm can pose a risk to your children's health and to the environment. The Maize, Nebraska farmer says you can help avoid accidents by recycling. 27 sites across Nebraska will accept pesticide containers in a University of Nebraska program. Some sites are open year-round, while others are either May through August or on specific days. Those specific sites are all listed in the May Nebraska Farmer, where you can also read more about this program. The deadline to apply for Nebraska LEAD Class 34 is less than a month away. Program Director Terry Hejny joined us this week to tell how LEAD Class 33 is spending its time and explain why you might be interested in taking part in the Nebraska LEAD program.
It's that time of the year we ramp up our recruiting efforts. It's hard to believe Nebraska LEAD Group 34 will start this fall.
Tell me something about what LEAD Class 33 has been up to.
Well, they've been up to a lot of things their first year in the program. As you know, they attended 6 three-day seminars throughout the state of Nebraska, and participated in a 10-day study travel seminar to Kansas City, Washington, D.C., and Chicago.
And in Chicago, something that people might have read about in the news, they developed a relationship with a school in Chicago, and they've partnered with them to sort of develop ag a little bit more. Tell me more about that.
Well, they're taking it to the next level. You know, I heard about the Chicago High School for Ag Sciences when I was a high school agriculture instructor sitting at the National Convention in Kansas City, and when we had the opportunity in 2009 to visit this school, an inner city high school that specializes in agriculture, we sure worked out a relationship with them. But during our tour of the school after the presentation by the students, one of the animal science instructors was talking about them wanting to ramp up their beef program. And you know, that idea caught fire with the LEAD fellows in LEAD 33, and they ended up, the group did some planning, some organizing. They ended up purchasing 4 feeder calves for the group. The principal and school manager came out and picked up those animals. They're back in Chicago and doing well.
Living in the city now, right?
They are living in the city.
Why would someone want to apply for the LEAD program?
Well, you know, it's to give back to agriculture, to be the voice for the next generation of agriculture. You know, personal development is a very important part of it, professional development, but you know, our folks are servant leaders. They want to attain the skills and the experiences that help them become the leaders for Nebraska agriculture, so that's why.
Is there a component in there addressing things that are critical to ag now, sort of connecting to consumers, things like that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we do a lot of how we advocate in a positive way for agriculture, telling the farmer and rancher story. Who's best to tell it but a farmer and rancher? And we think that we play a pretty important role in helping them get ready to do that. You know, we provide a lot of the current issues training that's out there, helping them to see all sides of the story and then come up with informed decisions.
Give me the details about the application process.
Well, you know, application deadline, Jeff, June 15th. So call our office, 402-472-6810 if they've got questions about the program. If they want to obtain the application materials, we can send it to them electronically, but they need to get in touch with us because June 15th is the deadline. After that, Jeff, we'll do a series of interviews, 5 of them across the state of Nebraska in July. You know, we divide the state up into 5 areas and we select our individuals from that. So it's truly a statewide leadership program.
For more information on applications or Nebraska LEAD program details, you can visit lead.unl.edu. Argentina has long been known for its grass-fed beef industry. Today, however, most cattle in the country are finished in feedlots rather than in the grassy flatlands of the Pampas region. As more farmers opt to grow crops such as corn and soybeans, fewer grasslands are available for grazing. This week, Curtis Harm shows you one example of a feedlot we visited during our trip to Argentina in mid-January.
Just about halfway in between Argentina's third largest city, Rosario, and the country's capital, Buenos Aires, lies Proteco feedlot. The feedlot began in 1996 on nearly 173 acres of land and had the initial capacity to hold 6,000 head of cattle. Today, the feedlot has expanded to nearly 350 acres and can hold up to 15,000 head of cattle. Proteco is considered to be one of the top 10 largest feedlots in Argentina. Juanjo Mataldi is a manager with Proteco Feedlot. He says there are several cattle owners who contract with the feedlot.
There are a big diversity of owners, of cattle owners. Today, currently, they have about 15 different clients. You have cow-calf operations, you have slaughter plants, supermercados. There's some professionals of the town, dentists or doctors or whatever, who want to invest and buy their cattle and put them here.
The feedlot feeds young calves starting at 77 pounds. The calves shown here have been at the feedlot for approximately 20 days and each weigh roughly 165 pounds. Heifers and steers usually come to the feedlot weighing from 375 to 440 pounds. All of the new cattle go through an adaptation period when they first arrive and receive fiber-based rations for the first 15 to 20 days.
When they come in, the first 7 days is a ration that has a pretty high content of grass, forage. The following 7 days, they go taking out the content of forage and they leave just a little bit. And from then on, they take out completely the forage and they're on the termination nutrition diet, let's say. 34% gluten feed, 20% wet distillers grains. Fiber, that is primarily corn husk, is 10-12%. Then broken corn kernels.
Like in fed beef cattle in the United States, corn is one of the largest expenses in the Argentine cattle diet. During the summer months in Argentina, which is around December through March, cattle are fed 30% of their daily ration at 6 a.m., and then the remaining 70% after 4 p.m. Due to genetics and feed rations, cattle will gain around 2.2 to 3.3 pounds per day and remain at the facility for 100 to 120 days.
The heifers will be marketed at 270, 300 kilos. Depending how light they come in, usually they stay those 100, 120 days. And it obviously depends how big and how much they weigh when they come in. But in general, the steers, light steers, will be marketed between 340, 380 kilos.
When Market Journal visited the feedlot in early 2014, we were able to see a fairly new addition to the Proteco feedlot. There were several bulls going through the finishing process before being sent to slaughter plants. The bull carcasses are graded on the same scale as the rest of the cattle, and Montaldi says there isn't a difference in the meat quality between the bulls and the steers. Since 1996, the feedlot has finished more than 510,000 head of cattle. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Curtis Harms.
And this completes our coverage from South America, but if you missed any of our reporting from Brazil or Argentina, including our pieces on the increase in soybean acres and export challenges in both countries, you can find all of our work online at marketjournal.unl.edu/South America. Al Dutcher is traveling this week in place of his normal weekly weather forecast. Here's Al with a long-range outlook.
Well, folks, here again on Saturday. I am currently on vacation, so I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to bring you up to date, not only on the snowpack, but this impending El Nino, since this Climate Prediction Center has now put out an advisory for the event to start to materialize as we go through the summer months, and particularly as we head into the fall period. So let's take a look at what we're kind of looking at as we go through this next 3 months. And the one thing I'll draw your attention to is this is the estimated stream flows put out by NRCS for this summer, and it relates directly to the amount of snow that's in the mountains and of course the water that's in that snow. And I think I'll draw your trend to basically from central Colorado northward all the way to the Canadian border. You see all of these light blues to dark blue readings. Essentially what the NRCS is saying is that because of the extensive snowpack that we have, the expectations are stream flows from central Colorado all the way up to the Canadian border will be somewhere within the range of about 110% of normal stream flow rates for the summer months to upwards of 140%. And it really is basin specific. So for the Platte River Basin, currently we're running about 134% of snow water equivalent in north central Colorado basin. As we get into south central Wyoming, we're right around 118%. The Laramie Basin is up around 130 to 140% depending on which day you look at. So overall we got a really decent snowpack. Now the one thing that we're going to be paying attention to now is that we do have an El Nino event starting to materialize, and we're always looking at the equatorial Pacific for above normal sea surface temperatures. We need to see 3 consecutive months for the basin to average a half degree Celsius above normal, about a degree above normal. And as that does that, they start to change the dynamics. You start to see more moisture moving into the southern United States with a subtropical jet, and that does to enhance precipitation across the southern one-third of the United States. Now, the one fly in the ointment is that we're still seeing some cold air, or cold surface temperatures coming in from the Antarctic region up into the central equatorial Pacific, and that's putting a lid on the ability for this to rapidly expand. And that is the reason why this event right now is projected to be somewhere between a weak to a moderate event. If we see this broad-based colder sea surface temperatures rapidly disappear, then we would expect this event to be much stronger. But irregardless, basically the models are indicating anywhere from late summer to early fall is when we will start to hit El Nino qualifications, and then the intensity will depend on how rapidly this event builds and how long it lives. But there is an important thing that we can note on the forecast. If we start to look at the monsoon flow, so this would be your May, June, July forecast, you'll see above normal precipitation tendencies in the southwest. As we go into the June, July, and August period, we see that area expands, and as we get into the July, August, September period, we see a large area of above normal precipitation extending into the western part of the state. So this would be excellent news in terms of supplementing the irrigators in western Nebraska with additional moisture from the monsoon season. So we'll hope that this verifies.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews on grain markets, drought conditions in Nebraska, soybean seedling diseases, the Nebraska LEAD Program, and a look inside an Argentine feedlot can be found on the Market Journal website and through the Market Journal mobile app. Next week, John Moret will be our corn and soybean marketing analyst. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska Lincoln Extension, where you can know how, know now. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
A diesel-powered engine on a farm works hard and operates in a grueling environment. Soy biodiesel fuels stand up to the challenge of powering farm equipment, but are also renewable and environmentally responsible as well. The Nebraska Soybean Board is committed to encouraging the use of soy biodiesel to protect the environment and sustain Nebraska's agriculture. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.